A single notification family reunion, July 5th noon. I didn't hesitate. I already knew something was off. It had come through on a Wednesday morning, wedged between a quarterly earnings report and a client escalation. Still, that short line made my stomach tighten more than any investor call ever could. Last year, I offered to host. Spent days prepping my home in Pittsburgh, even catered it myself. They declined, said the drive was too far. This year, no discussion, just a text from Chloe assuming I'd make the 2-hour trip to the same house I grew up in. The air was thick when I pulled into the driveway, cicadas humming like they remembered me. The porch hadn't changed. The chipped white railings, the dent in the mailbox, from when Chloe crashed Dad's truck at 17, it all waited for me like a stage set for a play I didn't audition for. Red, white, and blue bunting still clung to the banisters from the 4th. A forced patriotism, much like our family's version of love on display, but mostly decoration. No one greeted me. I parked behind Ryan's oversized SUV and carried my store-bought lemon tart to the kitchen in silence. They were already halfway through small talk on the back patio, drinks in hand paper plates balanced on knees. Chloe saw me first. Liv. Finally, she called out as if I were late, as if my arriving at all hadn't been a choice. She kissed the air beside my cheek, then turned to everyone else. See? She's still alive. Laughter followed. Joanna gave me a once-over and an arched brow. You look tired. Are you sleeping enough? I'm fine, I said. Gerald mumbled something about the weather. Jasmine, Chloe's friend or co-worker, or maybe both, gave me a polite nod. I noticed her plate was barely touched. I found an open seat next to Gerald. The cushion was damp. Chloe was already in full performance mode. We've just been slammed lately. Ryan's hours got cut. Daycare is expensive, and you know how the mortgage is. Joanna sighed dramatically. Everyone's doing their best. Olivia, maybe you can suggest some strategies. You've always had a good head for finance. I took a sip of lukewarm lemonade. Maybe. The conversation kept circling back to one theme, how hard life had been for Chloe and Ryan. Ryan, whose shirt said grill master, and who hadn't touched the actual grill. He leaned back and smirked. You know, in some countries, families pool all their income. Makes sense. Keeps everyone afloat. Joanna laughed a little too loud. Yes, but Olivia's always been independent. That word. It always sounded like a compliment with a bruise beneath it. I watched as Chloe passed around pictures of her kids again, talked about soccer camps, orthodontist bills, weekend getaways they really couldn't afford. Then Joanna mentioned the old house needing roof repairs, how expensive it all was. And then, in the same breath, asked me what I'd brought. Lemon tart, I said. Store-bought. No one touched it. Dinner ended with half-empty glasses, 2 sweet cake, and sticky paper plates. I stood to leave, but Jasmine caught my arm lightly, her expression unreadable. You should check your account, she whispered. Tonight. I blinked. What? But she just turned and went inside. The drive back was darker than usual. My headlights cut through the trees like accusations. I replayed every look, every sentence. Jasmine had barely spoken all night. Why that warning? By the time I reached home, it was past 2 a.m. The house was still. My phone buzzed once Chloe tagging everyone in a family memories photo dump. I opened my banking app, typed in my passcode, waited, 0 ovens. Ryan didn't flinch. We needed it more than you. At first, I thought I had misheard him, that the early hour, the clink of coffee mugs, and the faint whir of the ceiling fan had somehow garbled what he said. But no. He leaned back in his chair, scratched his chin like he was the one wronged, and looked right through me. The kitchen was quiet, almost reverent, like a church after a scandal. Light spilled through the half-open blinds, slicing across the laminate floor and the untouched plates of leftover pie. Chloe sat across from me, arms folded, eyes unblinking. She didn't look guilty. She looked bored. I pushed my phone across the table screen, still lit with the zeroed-out balance. Is this a joke? Chloe didn't even blink. It wasn't like you were using it. That one sentence, so casually cruel, burned hotter than any scream. I turned to Joanna. My mother was sipping lukewarm tea, pinky raised like we were still playing pretend at being a respectable family. You knew she didn't answer right away. That was her thing. Delay. Let silence hang long enough, and maybe the question would dissolve. But I didn't let it. Her eyes finally met mine. Olivia, you've always been so distant. You don't call, you don't check in. We didn't think you'd miss it. I laughed. Actually laughed because I couldn't cry. Not yet? It was over $60,000. Ryan shrugged. You grew up with a lot. Chloe and I, we've been struggling. You could have asked? We didn't think you'd say yes. That broke me. Not the theft, not even the lies, but the quiet collective belief that I wouldn't help them. So they just took. I looked at Chloe again. She wore a hoodie I bought her in college back when she was failing classes, and I covered rent without hesitation. She never paid me back. She never even said thank you. What did you use it for? I asked. Chloe rolled her eyes like it was an inconvenience to explain. Bills, groceries, credit cards, some repairs. I narrowed my gaze. You mean your Disney trip and your new iPhone? Her lips twitched. Don't be dramatic. I felt something shift inside me, like a window slamming shut. My voice dropped low. How did you even get into my account? That's when Chloe looked at Mom. Not me, not Ryan, just Mom. Joanna sighed like this was the part she didn't want to explain, but had accepted as a necessary evil. You left the login sheet in your old desk drawer. Chloe found it when she was looking for— I wasn't looking for anything, Chloe cut in. You said she wouldn't mind. You said she never checks that account. Joanna didn't deny it. She just folded her napkin and set it on the table like this was over. I turned to Gerald, my father, the man who used to tuck me in with bedtime stories about ethics and decency, now looked down at his plate like the silverware had more to say than he did. Dad? I asked. Do you have anything to add? He cleared his throat. Your mother and I, we thought it was best not to involve you until it was resolved. Resolved? I echoed, my voice rising. You mean, until you thought I wouldn't notice? Ryan finally spoke again, as if to deliver the final verdict. It's not like we emptied your main account, just the savings. You weren't doing anything with it. Joanna nodded almost gently. It's not stealing if it's for family. There it was, the sentence that snapped the last thread. I stood up. Not because I wanted to leave, not yet, but because I didn't trust my body to stay seated without shaking. My hands were cold even in the sticky heat of July. The air smelled like leftover pie and betrayal. You all made a choice, I said. And I will too. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked toward the door one step at a time, knowing that every move forward was a move away from who I'd been and toward who I needed to become. Joanna, it's not stealing if it's for family. They didn't say sorry. They said, you've always had more. I stared at the ceiling in my apartment long after the drive back from Pennsylvania. The rain had followed me halfway home, soft, persistent, like it refused to let me forget. And I hadn't. Not for a second. The words they'd flung at me echoed not like insults, but as doctrine-spoken truths they had always believed. You've always had more. Not because I was given it, but because I made it. I scheduled a visit to the bank first thing Monday morning. Lena Kim, my old friend from grad school who now worked in client services, met me with a tight smile and eyes that spoke before her mouth could. Let's talk in the side office, she said softly. We sat behind closed doors, silence thick as she tapped on her keyboard. I watched the flicker of her screen reflect in her glasses, each line of data confirming what I already knew but didn't want to believe. There was a login from your home IP address, she said, glancing at me gently. 4 days ago. Full transfer. Authentication verified. Password correct. I swallowed hard. The password I haven't changed in years. She nodded. And the same device used to access your statements last month. I clenched my jaw. Chloe. The betrayal was no longer theory. It was transactionally recorded, time-stamped, traceable. But as Lena spoke, my mind slipped backward the way memories tend to slide in when you're hurting. My 17th birthday. I had asked for lemon cake, my favorite. Mom had said she was too tired to bake, so I made it myself from a box mix I bought with babysitting money. Meanwhile, the year before Chloe's sweet 16 had been a catered affair. Balloons guessed a slideshow. I even helped clean up afterward. They called it love. They called it tradition. Then there was senior year. I was applying to scholarships while Chloe was failing biology. I gave up the NYU visit so she could retake the SAT. "You're the strong one," Mom had said. "Chloe needs this more." Even when Dad fell sick during my sophomore year in college, I was the one who took night buses back to help Mom at the hospital. Chloe said hospitals made her anxious. I didn't complain. Not once. Not even when I missed midterms. "You're the mature one," they'd said. Responsibility had always been my role. A crown and a collar. After the bank, I drove straight home. Not to my apartment, but to my actual home, my past. The little 2-bedroom duplex I bought 5 years ago when I finally felt stable enough to stop renting. I hadn't lived here full-time in months, but I kept it clean intact. A sort of shrine to the life I built without them. I made tea. Opened the drawer where I kept old mementos. A picture of Grandma came loose from a folder. She stood in her garden, holding tomatoes, smiling like she always knew the secrets of the world. She used to say, "Keep records. Silence is not peace." Beneath the photo was a leather notebook, her handwriting clear-angled, full of bite. Recipes on one page, expense logs on the next, notes from calls with the lawyer when she filed her will. No embellishments, just facts. Proof. I sat on the floor, the book open in my lap, her words whispering from the ink like they'd been waiting for me. This didn't happen because of desperation. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was planned. They knew I wouldn't be there for the login. They knew I rarely checked that account. And they knew no one would question their version of the story because no one ever had. But now I was done playing the mature one, the bigger person, the one who bites her tongue for the sake of keeping peace. I looked around the room, my house, my life, built brick by brick from sacrifices they never saw. Every unpaid favor, every unreturned call, every tear I swallowed so Chloe wouldn't have to cry. They thought they engineered this. She whispers, "Then I'll engineer something of my own." They always mistook my silence for surrender. It was never surrender. It was strategy. And now I had no reason left to play the diplomat. By the time dusk fell, my apartment was dim, but buzzing screen lights blinking like sentinels, cursor blinking over spreadsheet after spreadsheet. I sat barefoot at my dining table, hair pulled into a loose knot, sleeves rolled past my elbows. This wasn't a war I had declared, but I would finish it with precision. Grandma used to say, "The quiet ones always have the best receipts." I never understood the weight of that sentence until now. Because silence isn't passivity, it's preparation. And I had spent my entire life preparing without knowing it. I began by backing up every file, every monthly statement from 2020 until now. Not just savings, but credit reports, log-in histories, confirmation emails, timestamps. I didn't just print them, I organized them, categorized them, indexed them like someone preparing for audit. My fingers moved fast, but my heart stayed steady. Calm. That kind of calm that only lives inside someone who's finally moved past shock and into clarity. After a few hours, I texted Lena. "Do you have a moment?" I wrote. She called within minutes. "Any updates?" I asked, skipping pleasantries. "There are access logs from a different location," she said. "Not your devices, not even your apartment IP. They show up around midnight, consistently, for the last 3 months. Can you see where it's a mobile device? But the nearest tower is somewhere near Silver Creek, Chloe's neighborhood." Of course. My hand didn't even shake as I wrote that down. I just stared at the location and let the final puzzle pieces settle into place. They didn't need to ask me for money. They just took it like they had every right to. "I'm going to escalate this," I told her. "You're serious," Lena said, almost like a question, but not quite. "I'm beyond serious." After we hung up, I searched online until I found a law firm that specialized in internal financial abuse. Not scams, not phishing, real world, real name, real bloodline theft. The receptionist took my name, asked a few questions, and transferred me to someone with a measured voice and a sharper mind. "You're not alone," the lawyer said after hearing the summary. "But this will come down to intent and records. If we can show this wasn't a misunderstanding or shared account access, you have a case. And if it's family, that just makes it harder emotionally, not legally." That was enough. I booked a full consult for the following week. For the first time in days, my breathing came easy. I started printing every page. I took them to the corner postal store and had them notarized every document, every chart, even a timeline I hand drew to track Chloe's access. Then I mailed a full set to myself, certified, sealed, dated. The lawyer had advised it, and I wanted no loopholes. No, I didn't know, or that wasn't my login. This time, my silence would be documented, weaponized. The next morning, I poured myself coffee and stepped out onto the small balcony. Light filtered through the clouds, soft and indifferent. The world was moving on, unaware that mine had already shifted. My phone buzzed. "Ryan, just one line. We know you're talking to people. Back off." I stared at it. Let the anger simmer quietly under my skin. They had no idea. There's a difference between setting boundaries and building walls. I did neither. They did both. I chose the cafe for a reason, neutral ground. The kind of place where nobody raised their voice and every table had just enough distance to keep emotions civilized. I sat by the window, watching traffic crawl past the flower boxes and pedestrian crossings, waiting. My coffee had gone lukewarm by the time Joanna slid into the seat across from me. She didn't say hello, just glanced at my untouched drink and sighed. "You always were so dramatic." I didn't respond. Drama? No. Drama was draining someone's account and then inviting them to coffee like it was a casual misunderstanding. I stared at her until she flinched, a small twitch in the corner of her mouth betraying the mask. "We just wanted to explain," she began. I said. Funny. It was Chloe who accessed the account. It was Ryan who texted me to back off. And you gave her the password. Joanna's lips tightened. "You don't understand what we're dealing with. You never tried to." I pulled out the folder. Neatly printed statements. Login timestamps. Locations. I placed it on the table like a deck of cards face up. She glanced down, scoffed. "So you're collecting evidence against your own family now?" "No," I said. "I'm finally documenting the truth." She leaned back, folding her arms. "Is this who you've become? Cold, bitter, vindictive." "No," I said again. "This is who I've been all along. You just never noticed because I wasn't loud about it." She shook her head. "You're tearing this family apart?" I didn't flinch. The family was already in pieces. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Her eyes softened briefly, like she might reach across the table. But that moment passed as quickly as it came. Chloe is struggling. Ryan hasn't had steady work in years. Gerald's pension barely covers, and you thought stealing from me would solve that? My voice rose slightly. You didn't ask. You didn't warn me. You didn't even apologize. Joanna looked away, as if the potted plant beside us had more to offer than her daughter's rage. "We thought you wouldn't miss it. You always have more. More." That word again. The excuse. The shield. The permission slip to take whatever they wanted. I slid the folder back into my bag and stood. "You've mistaken my silence for consent. That ends today." Outside, I paused under the awning and let the July heat press against my skin. My phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Your notarized reports are ready for upload." I texted back, "On my way." Filing the fraud report took the rest of the afternoon. I submitted everything, every receipt, IP log, notarized affidavit. I didn't look back. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was drawing a line they could never cross again. Back home, I changed into soft clothes, lit a candle, and sank into my couch with a tired exhale. The silence didn't feel like surrender. This time, it felt earned. Then just as I reached for the remote, my phone lit up again. An email. From Jasmine. Subject: "We need to talk." I opened it. "There's something I need to tell you. It's about Ryan." "I didn't know he was going to take all of it," Jasmine said. "But I didn't stop him either." She said it so softly, I nearly missed it over the hum of the espresso machine. We were tucked in the corner booth of a downtown cafe, the kind that smelled like burnt cinnamon and spilled secrets. Outside, the rain poured against the windows like it had something to prove. The dim lighting gave her face a strange glow. Remorse, guilt. Something else I couldn't name yet. I wrapped my hands around the mug in front of me, not for warmth, but to anchor myself. "Start from the beginning," I said. My voice was steady, but my pulse was not. Jasmine exhaled. That night after the reunion, Ryan and I came back to my place. He was stressed, kept pacing, muttering about how Olivia won't help unless we force her hand. I thought he was just venting. I didn't interrupt. I wanted her to hear herself every word without comfort or rescue. She continued. He asked to use my laptop to check something. Said his phone battery was dead. I didn't think much of it. I mean, he's Chloe's husband. I trusted him. My jaw clenched. That word trusted, how casually we gave it away. I went to bed, Jasmine said, eyes flickering toward her untouched tea. Next morning, he was gone. So was the laptop. When I asked, he just said, "Handled it." That's when I got that feeling. You know when you're not sure yet, but your stomach already knows. I nodded. I knew it well. He brought the laptop back that night. I checked the browser history. He'd logged into your bank account. Her voice cracked. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to believe it. And then I saw your face at the reunion, how distant you looked. I figured something had happened. You didn't think to warn me sooner? I asked, trying not to let the betrayal drip too thick into my tone. I did. That's why I told you to check your account, she said quickly. I didn't know how bad it was. But when you left early, I thought maybe you'd already figured it out. I studied her tight shoulders, bitten nails, that shame she didn't know how to hide. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the architect either. Did you keep any records? I asked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. All of it browser logs, the timestamps, screenshots. I've been sitting on this for days. I couldn't live with it. I took it not immediately, but with a pause. You understand this puts you in the middle of a fraud investigation. I know, she whispered, but I'd rather face that than keep lying to you. There was a silence between us, then long and heavy. Not hostile, just full of things that couldn't be unsaid. I trusted you, I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. I didn't earn it, she replied. The flash drive in my pocket felt heavier than it should. Jasmine's confession shifted everything. It gave me not just evidence, but leverage, and it cracked open another layer of this mess. Chloe wasn't acting alone. This wasn't a daughter going rogue. This was a coordinated betrayal, marital, maternal, and financial. My phone vibrated on the table. A text from Lena. Just found Chloe's IP used at 2:34 a.m. to log in. From your parents' house. I didn't go for revenge. I went for evidence loud enough that they'd hear the silence differently. The receptionist at Delaney and Associates offered me water and a patient smile before ushering me into the glass-walled meeting room. The sun glared off downtown steel buildings, slicing across the polished table like a warning. Ms. Delaney entered with a slim leather folder and eyes that didn't blink too often. Ms. Grant. She greeted firm, but not cold. You came prepared. I hope I nodded and handed over the envelope and the flash drive. Everything's documented. Login records, IP traces, notarized statements. My friend Lena works in cybersecurity. She cross-referenced timestamps. Jasmine Holt provided a screen recording. Delaney arched a brow. An insider. A witness. Indirectly involved, regretfully. She nodded, slotting the flash drive into her laptop. The files loaded quickly. As she scanned through them, her expression never wavered. But her foot tapped once under the table, subtle but telling. They didn't even attempt to cover their digital trail. Nope, I said, folding my hands. They assumed I'd stay quiet. Like I always have. Delaney tilted her head. Not anymore. I take it. No, I said. Not this time. Within the hour, she drafted the formal inquiry to the fraud unit at my bank. The language was clinical, but every sentence felt like a blade slipping beneath the surface. The cease and desist email to Ryan Holt was less elegant, blunt, direct, and devastating. Would you like to include a summary of our evidence in the initial email, she asked? No, I said. Let him sweat. Let him wonder what I know and how much I've shared. She nodded, impressed. You're more strategic than most of my clients. I was raised to be quiet. That taught me to observe. Quiet doesn't mean powerless, she said, tapping a key to hit send. Sometimes it's just compressed force. By the time I left the office, the heat outside had broken into a heavy drizzle. I walked the 4 blocks home, slowly, letting the moisture soak into my sleeves, cooling the adrenaline burning under my skin. When I stepped inside, my phone was already lighting up. Ryan's name. I didn't answer. I watched the message preview scroll across my screen instead. Are you unstable? This is family, not some courtroom circus. Take this back. Now. I let out a short laugh. Not even a denial, just an accusation wrapped in false concern. Classic. If I didn't know any better, I'd almost believe it was worry. But I'd learned people like Ryan didn't fear consequences, they feared exposure. I forwarded the message to Delaney. Within 10 minutes, she replied, "Please refer to Section 11344 of the U.S. Criminal Code regarding bank fraud. Further threats will be documented." Simple, clean, lethal. Another buzz. This time, my mother's name. I braced myself and answered. "Olivia," she said, clipped. "What have you done?" I walked to the window, watching the drops race down the pane. I told the truth. "You're destroying this family." "No," I said, voice low. "I'm refusing to be destroyed by it." There was a pause on her end. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full of judgment, coiled and ready to strike. I knew that silence. I'd grown up with it, lived beneath it. When she finally spoke, her voice was frayed. "You used to understand that some things stay within the family. I used to believe that meant we protected each other," I replied. "Not exploited one person to protect everyone else's comfort. We needed help. So you stole it." It wasn't theft. It was survival. My fingers tightened around the phone. Not mine. I ended the call without waiting for the rest. I didn't owe her closure. I'd spent too many years giving out grace no one earned. For a long while, I stood there motionless, watching my own reflection blur behind the rain. Then I opened my laptop again and created a secure folder labeled Phase 2. Joanna had called out of fear. Ryan had bluffed with threats. Chloe hadn't dared say a word since the bank inquiry began. Good. Let them wonder what else I had. Let them question how long I'd been building this. They'd drawn their lines in silence. Now, they were about to hear mine. The house may have my name on the deed, but it's their shame on the walls. I stepped inside my parents' home for the first time since the reunion. The scent hadn't changed lemon cleaner and old expectations. The walls were still lined with graduation portraits, but only Chloe's had been reframed. Mine was still cracked glass missing in the top left corner from when it had fallen during the move. No one had ever bothered to fix it. Joanna was sitting stiffly in the living room, tissue and hand mascara ghosting under her eyes. Chloe sat across from her, curled into herself like a child facing the principal's office. Neither looked up when I arrived. I didn't announce myself. Just walked in like I belonged there. Because technically, I still did. The house was legally co-owned part of a tax transfer when I helped them refinance after Dad's stroke. A detail they'd conveniently forgotten. Joanna's voice cracked before I could sit. They came this morning. A detective, with a badge, said it was just preliminary questioning. Do you know what that does to a neighborhood reputation? She looked at me like I had invited the authorities myself. Chloe sniffled. Why are you doing this to us? To you? I blinked. You mean like draining someone's life savings or using their login to commit wire fraud? It wasn't. Chloe stopped herself. Intentional, I offered. Or malicious. Or illegal. Ryan, of course, wasn't there. He was always suspiciously absent when accountability knocked. Joanna reached for her phone like she wanted to call him. Instead, she dropped it onto the couch, limp with defeat. We were going to fix it, Olivia Joanna said. We just needed time. You had time. Years of it. The conversation shifted with the weight of something unspoken, Guilt, maybe, or just the realization that I wasn't here to forgive. I was here to witness. Joanna whispered, "This is tearing us apart." No, this is revealing what was already broken. Chloe stood, voice rising, shrill and panicked. "You're ruining this family. You always thought you were better than us. You left. You made your money. You think that makes you right? I don't think anything. I know facts. And the facts are, you used my trust to steal from me. You lied. You hid. You blamed." Joanna buried her face in her hands. "What will people say? That's what concerns you." "What they'll say?" I laughed bitterly. "What about what I had to say? What about the years I swallowed everything so you could sleep better at night?" No answer. I stood slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked on the hardwood. That same floor I'd helped install when I was 19 and home for a summer break nobody acknowledged. "I didn't ruin this family," I said. "I just stopped paying for the illusion." Silence. Total. Chloe's face flushed red, a mixture of anger and something else, maybe shame, if she could still feel it. I left them in that silence. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. Back in the car, Lena's name flashed across my phone. "You won't believe what I just found. It's about the house title. I bought it. They lived in it. Now they're suing me for it." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. Lena's hands trembled as she handed me the sealed envelope. We stood in the cool, impersonal lobby of the city records office, the air humming with the distant buzz of old fluorescents. Outside, the humidity of late July pressed against the glass doors, but in here, everything was sterile. Everything except the contents of that envelope. "It's official," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "They filed the claim yesterday." I tore it open with the kind of composure I'd practiced all my life. Inside, the papers were neatly typed. Chloe Grant versus Olivia Grant. In a bizarre twist of entitlement, my sister was suing me over the house I purchased with my own post-tax dollars years ago, with no one's help and no expectation of anything but peace. The house they now occupied like squatters in someone else's victory. She's claiming there was a verbal agreement. Lena continued, her eyes scanning mine for any cracks. "That you promised her joint ownership in exchange for unspecified help with emotional support and household duties." I exhaled through my nose. "Is that even legally real?" Lena gave a faint, disbelieving laugh. "People have sued for less, but the burden of proof is on her. Still, this is public now." That word, public. It sent a shiver down my spine, not fear, but adrenaline. We weren't in the kitchen anymore. This wasn't a scolding over forgotten birthdays or silent punishments served cold at the dinner table. This was a legal war. And Chloe, once the fragile flower of our family, had dropped the act. Her mask had slipped. I drove straight to Miss Delaney's office, the building's stone facade radiating confidence. She looked up as I entered, already holding a highlighter between her fingers and a stack of legal briefs in front of her. "I've seen it," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "It's laughable. But this isn't about facts. It's about perception." I nodded, pulling a folding chair closer. "They want to paint me as greedy." "No," she corrected. "They want to paint you as cruel. A cold sister who kicked her struggling family out of their sanctuary. Never mind the fact that you paid every mortgage installment while they played house." She laid down the papers and fixed me with her sharp, no-nonsense gaze. "They think going public will shame you. What they're not expecting is that we'll let it. If they want a spectacle, they're going to get it with affidavits, timestamps, and federal law on our side." My phone buzzed. A new email from an unfamiliar address. "Hi, Olivia. This is Mallory James from the Weston Post. We're running a story titled, 'Daughter Sues Sister Over Inheritance Home.' Would you like to comment?" I stared at the screen for a moment too long. Lena leaned over my shoulder. "They're trying to spin this already." "Good," I said quietly. "Let them spin. I'll supply the receipts." My mind flashed back to the argument in that house, Joanna crying in the kitchen, Chloe accusing me of ruining the family, and now this. Legal action from the same people who used my password like a spare key. They'd broken boundaries and now wanted to sue me for locking the door. Back at my apartment, I drafted a statement careful and measured no comment at this time, but all claims will be addressed through appropriate legal channels. I CC'd Delaney. She approved it with a single thumbs-up emoji, more emotion than I'd seen from her in 2 weeks. By nightfall, I was trending in Weston's local digital tabloid. Heirloom Home in Dispute screamed the headline. They used an old photo of Chloe smiling at her baby shower on the porch of my house. No mention of the fact that I was the one holding the camera, the one who bought the cake, or the one who paid the property taxes that month. The irony gnawed at me how easy it was to erase my name from a narrative I built. But not this time. I called Lena. Let's prep everything. Dates logs, loan statements. Let them come. Because while they were building a story, I was building a case. She left a letter. They buried it. I found it. The house was silent save for the occasional creak of its bones, old wood settling like an uneasy conscience. I hadn't stepped through the side gate in years, but today I didn't hesitate. Lena waited in the car engine, running phone clutched like a lifeline. I told her I wouldn't be long. I lied. Upstairs, the air was thick with July heat and the scent of cedar. I stepped carefully, avoiding the hallway spots that groaned loudest. My parents were out meeting Chloe's attorney, or so Lena had confirmed. That gave me maybe 30 minutes. Just enough. The attic door opened with a reluctant groan, as though even the house resented my presence. Dust clung to the air in slow golden spirals, catching the sunbeams that sliced through a cracked window pane. The last time I was here, I was 12. Grandma had taken me up to show me her legacy chest. I'd thought she meant old photo albums and moth-eaten quilts. Maybe she had then. But now I knew she meant more. The trunk sat exactly where I remembered, center of the attic, draped in a thin sheet that hadn't done much to keep the dust off. I hesitated for a breath, then opened it. Inside were folded linens, brittle newspapers from 2001, in a shoebox labeled Taxes 2013. My heart thudded. I dug deeper. Under a thin layer of yellowing envelopes and neatly tied cords of receipts, I saw it. An envelope, heavy cream paper sealed with a faded wax stamp. No name. Just Grandma's handwriting in delicate loops for the right eyes. I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor and cracked the seal. The letter was dated March 19, 2019, 4 months before her stroke. Her voice unfolded in my mind with every sentence. To whom it may concern. This letter is written to state with clear mind and full intent that it is my wish for the property at 81 Mulberry Street to be inherited solely by my granddaughter, Olivia Grant. No other family member has contributed to its upkeep, nor have they shown the sense of duty and discipline Olivia has exemplified since childhood. If you find this letter, it means the others did not respect my final requests. I trust Olivia will know what to do. Eleanor Marie Grant. My throat tightened. I stared at her name, her signature strong despite age, and blinked away tears. Back downstairs, I took a photo of the letter and immediately messaged it to Lena. She didn't text back. She called. "Oh my God," she said, breathless. "Liv, this is it. This is the intent clause. It's binding if we validate the signature. I'll bring it to you in 10, I said, sealing the envelope again. By the time I made it back to the car, Lena had already alerted Ms. Delaney. We met her at her office an hour later. She scanned the letter silently, nodding, before finally saying, "This isn't just sentiment. This is legal intent." I exhaled for the first time in days without feeling like I was drowning. Outside the law office, the air smelled like a storm coming thick electric. Lena checked her phone and stiffened. "You're not going to believe this." What she handed me her phone, a voicemail from the precinct, and a follow-up text. "Olivia Grant, we'd like to schedule a time for you to formally testify. They didn't expect me to show up with evidence. I didn't expect them to lie under oath." Courtroom 2B buzzed with the kind of anticipation I usually associated with hospital waiting rooms or funerals, places where truths got laid bare, and pretenses couldn't survive the light. The walls were a neutral gray, the kind that swallowed sound, but the whispers still found their way through. Ms. Delaney and I sat at the plaintiff's table, our folders neatly arranged, every document tabbed and cross-referenced. She wore her signature dark blazer, the one that meant business. I wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry, no distractions. I didn't need armor. I had facts. Across from us sat the people who once passed for family. Chloe had dressed the part of a sympathetic single mother, soft cardigan hair pulled back a tremble at the corners of her lips. Ryan, in a too-tight suit, glared at everyone like this was beneath him. Joanna, composed as ever, wore her pearls, and a frozen expression she probably thought counted as maternal concern. Gerald wasn't present. Apparently, this was too messy for him. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Ramirez entered with a quiet authority that silenced even the gallery. She glanced through her docket, adjusted her glasses, and spoke in a clear, even tone. "We're here today for a preliminary hearing regarding case number CV-3127, Grant versus Grant Holt et al." Delaney stood. "Your Honor, we will present evidence of unauthorized access to my client's financial accounts and fraudulent attempts to claim co-ownership of a property held solely in her name." Judge Ramirez nodded. "Proceed." Chloe was the first to testify. Her voice was soft, but steady, rehearsed. "Olivia and I had an agreement," she began. "It wasn't formal, but it was understood. She said once the dust settled from Grandma's estate, she'd add me to the deed." "Did she ever write this down, sign anything?" Ramirez asked. Chloe hesitated. "No, but she said it. Several times. We were close. This was meant to be ours." Delaney rose slowly. "Permission to submit certified documentation of sole property ownership and a handwritten letter from the original owner, Eleanor Grant." The judge accepted the envelope. As she read silently, I watched Chloe's face pale slightly. Delaney continued. "This letter, dated March 2019, states clearly that Eleanor Grant wished her home to be inherited solely by Olivia Grant. No other claimants are mentioned. Additionally, we submit evidence of unauthorized access to Ms. Grant's financial accounts logged from IP addresses linked to Mr. Holt and Ms. Chloe Grant." Ryan shifted. "IP addresses can be spoofed." Ramirez looked up sharply. "Mr. Holt, you are not currently testifying. You'll have your turn. One more outburst and I'll ask you to leave." He sat back, jaw-clenched, arms folded across his chest like a sulking teenager. Joanna leaned over to Chloe and whispered something. Chloe's hands trembled slightly. Delaney stepped forward. "We also have witness testimony from Ms. Jasmine Holt confirming Mr. Holt accessed Ms. Grant's account using her personal laptop. Her statement is notarized and supported by a time-stamped log." There was a beat of silence before Delaney added, "This isn't a family misunderstanding. It's a deliberate pattern of financial manipulation." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Grant, would you like to make a statement?" I stood steady. There was no agreement, no intention to share ownership. I bought that house. I maintained that house. My silence all these years wasn't consent. It was exhaustion. Chloe glared at me now, the facade slipping. "You just want to ruin us." "I stopped funding you," I said quietly. "That's not the same thing." The judge tapped her pen against the folder. "I've reviewed the documentation, and in light of the letter and the digital forensics, I'm approving a full review under civil code. All related assets are to be temporarily frozen, pending further investigation." Chloe gasped audibly. Ryan muttered something under his breath. Joanna sat frozen. I caught the whisper just before it disappeared into the courtroom hum. "If she wins this," Joanna hissed to Ryan, "we lose everything. It wasn't the court that broke them. It was the truth they'd built everything on finally cracking." Ms. Delaney didn't speak as she slid the manila folder across the table toward me. Her expression was tighter than usual. Her lips pressed into a line that read somewhere between sympathy and fury. The hum of the office lights above us sounded louder than it should have. Or maybe it was the silence in my head that made everything else ring. "What is it?" I asked already, feeling the dread rise in my chest. Your credit report came back, she said. There's something you need to see. I opened the folder and my world tilted. There, stapled neatly, were statements from a credit card I never opened issued under my name, using my social security number, my address from 2 years ago. And months of charges, boutique spas, designer handbags, a luxury resort in the Poconos, purchases dating from early 2021 through late 2022. The account was maxed out with minimum payments missed for over 6 months. It was currently flagged as delinquent. I've never. My breath caught. Delaney leaned forward, her voice low. We've traced it. It was a secondary card. The primary holder was Chloe. She added you, without your knowledge, likely using old paperwork or data your family had access to. My fingers gripped the folder tighter. The numbers swam in front of me. $17,432 in charges. She wrecked my credit, I said slowly. On purpose. She did it quietly, Delaney corrected. That's what makes it worse. There was a knock on the door. Her assistant peeked in. Email from the local paper just came through. They're running the piece Friday morning. They've asked if Olivia would like to include a direct statement. Delaney turned to me. It's your call. I stared at the credit card summary again, at the dates, the transactions, the pattern of indulgence disguised as survival. How many times had they told me? We just needed help, when what they really needed was an endless line of credit in my name. I nodded. Tell them yes. My statement is simple. I stayed quiet long enough. That night, I sat by my apartment window with the lights off, watching the distant blur of headlights below. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. There was something colder in its place clarity. Like the fog had finally lifted, and I could see every lie laid out like tracks before a train wreck. The article dropped online just before dawn. Financial fraud. Hiding in plain sight. How a sister's generosity became her debt. My name was in the headline. Chloe's name was in bold 2 paragraphs down. The reporter hadn't sensationalized. They'd simply laid it bare. Bank logs, quotes from Ms. Delaney, a timeline of events, and then the personal Jasmine's anonymous statement, confirming that a close family member knowingly accessed accounts not their own. I didn't need to refresh the comments. My inbox was already full. One message stood out. I'm so sorry this happened to you. It happened to me too with my brother. You're not alone. Another, your silence protected them. Your truth protects you. By mid-morning, my phone rang nonstop. Local news outlets, a national morning show producer, a small podcast that focused on women and financial abuse. I wasn't ready for interviews, but I was ready to stop hiding. At noon, Delaney called again. There's movement, she said. Someone withdrew a large amount from a joint account Ryan's name is attached. But he's not answering his lawyer's calls. By evening, it was confirmed. Ryan had vanished. No one knew where he went. His phone was off. His car wasn't at the house. Chloe claimed he went to clear his head but wouldn't elaborate. Joanna refused to speak to anyone, even Gerald, who finally called me with a tone I hadn't heard since I was 5, fear. Do you think he'd run? I didn't answer. I was too busy printing another copy of the credit report, labeling a new file, and placing it in my growing archive. If this was the unraveling, then I'd already learned how to hold the threads. This time, I wasn't letting go. Chloe stopped returning calls. Joanna said nothing. Gerald finally spoke just one sentence. I should have stopped them. It came on a Wednesday morning, the kind that carried the heavy breath of a storm that hadn't broken yet. The headlines were still fresh. The fallout from the article and credit fraud report had begun to unspool like the hem of a dress worn too thin. I had expected silence. What I didn't expect was Gerald showing up at my door. I hadn't seen him in weeks. He stood there in a windbreaker, too thin for the weather, his hands in his pockets, like he didn't know what to do with them anymore. I should have stopped them, he said before I could open my mouth. I saw it happening. I just let it happen. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my father not as passive, but broken, not as indifferent, but paralyzed. A man who'd chosen silence for so long, now realizing it cost him more than just his dignity. It cost him a daughter's trust. He sat on the edge of my sofa like he didn't deserve the cushion. She said it was temporary, that Chloe needed help, that Ryan had it handled. I didn't think they'd touch your name. Your future. They touched everything, I replied softly. And you said nothing. I know. He didn't cry, but the shame in his voice was louder than tears. We sat in silence for a few minutes. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. But something passed between us, an acknowledgement, maybe even the start of repair. The police report landed on Delaney's desk that afternoon. Ryan had been officially listed in an ongoing financial fraud investigation. Authorities traced a wire transfer made 6 weeks prior, $92,000 routed from Olivia Grant's savings account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The recipient matched a shell company Ryan had opened under an alias. It was sloppy, almost desperate. He's running, scared, Delaney said, flipping through the evidence. And that makes him dangerous. Chloe called that evening. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity overpowered bitterness. Her voice was raw, hollow. He left me. I said nothing. I didn't know she sobbed. I didn't know he'd take all of it and vanish. You knew enough to let him use my name? I said, voice steady. Silence stretched. I have nothing, Olivia. They're freezing accounts. Mom's in the hospital. I don't know what to do. Her desperation was thick and wet with guilt, but not the kind that heals, only the kind that begs for rescue. I listened not out of compassion, but to hear her finally admit what she'd never say before. I thought you'd always be there, she whispered. I was, I replied. Until you used me up. I ended the call before she could say more. Joanna's hospitalization came the next day. High blood pressure, anxiety-induced collapse. Gerald updated me in a quiet text. She's stable, not talking. I didn't go see her. I couldn't. But I did stand on my balcony that night, watching the city exhale beneath the summer haze. I thought about the roles we all played. The quiet enabler, the manipulator, the absent protector, and me, the daughter who bore it all until I didn't. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt clean. Late that evening, Delaney called. They're offering a settlement, she said. Chloe and Joanna. Ryan hasn't surfaced yet, but their lawyer just sent over a number. She paused. Want to see it? I didn't want their apology. I wanted my name back. Ms. Delaney's office smelled faintly of polished wood and citrus cleaner. The walls were lined with certificates, accomplishments earned quietly, like most worthwhile things. I sat across from her as she opened the final folder. Her fingertips paused on the first page, then gently turned it toward me. This is the last document, she said. Once signed, the transfer of full ownership and restored funds is irrevocable. You'll have everything back. I looked at my own name printed cleanly on the title. Olivia Elaine Grant. No asterisks, no co-signers, no legal footnotes, just mine. I signed in silence. The click of the pen echoed in my ears like a gavel. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a course correction in a story that had veered too far off the rails. Every step I'd taken, every sleepless night, every document scanned, every whispered memory of Grandma's voice had led here. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just exhaled long, and even like I was finally allowed to. Ms. Delaney gave me a nod that said more than any congratulations ever could. We reviewed the resolution one more time. The fraudulent debts Chloe had racked up using the secondary credit card were officially removed. The financial institutions had accepted our proof. The credit bureau issued a formal apology. It was the kind of letter that came with embossed seals and dry language, but it meant the world to me. My score was restored, my accounts replenished. The house legally and fully belonged to me. Delaney tilted her head. You have the right to make a public statement. The press is still circling. They're trying to spin this as family drama, but it's not. You know that. I nodded. I do. My inbox pinged on cue. A reporter had sent a draft headline for approval. Estranged sisters, battle over inheritance in courtroom showdown. I stared at it for a full minute before typing back, please revise headline. This wasn't a battle. It was financial abuse, and it happens quietly every day. I hit send and pushed my chair back. It was over, at least this chapter. The emotional residue clung like smoke, but I didn't mind the smell. It reminded me I'd walked through fire and came out clear-eyed. Delaney closed the folder with a satisfying snap. "Anything else you need?" "No," I said, "but I'll be in touch." Outside, the sun had returned. The pavement shimmered, and I paused on the sidewalk just to feel the heat on my skin. I thought about all the women who'd never gotten their names back, who didn't have notarized letters or tech-savvy friends or sharp lawyers. I thought about Grandma, who kept records and warnings and left me a compass when I didn't know I'd need one. I checked my phone one last time before heading home. A new email had arrived. Subject: University Lecture Series. Invitation to speak on financial autonomy, my alma mater. They wanted me to share my story, not just about what was taken, but how I reclaimed it. I read the closing line aloud, almost in disbelief. "Your resilience and transparency could help others protect what matters most." I didn't need their praise, but I would take the microphone. This time, I'd speak loudly enough for the quiet ones. They used to walk into my home like they owned it. Now they knock, and I don't answer. The scent of cinnamon candles floated through the air as warm light settled on the polished hardwood floors. I set down the final plate of pastries on the table and stepped back to admire the scene, my home whole, again, not just in bricks and furniture, but in energy. It felt like a living thing, now breathing in joy and exhaling every trace of manipulation it had once held. Lena arrived first, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Jasmine came next, her usual quiet smile brighter than I'd ever seen. We didn't toast to victory. We toasted to truth, to boundaries, to choosing ourselves even when it cost everything. We laughed over things that weren't painful. For once, there were no apologies laced with guilt or questions wrapped in obligations. Jasmine leaned in at one point, her eyes soft. "You know, she said you were never the problem. Just the only one brave enough to admit there was one." I didn't speak. I just nodded and let that sentence settle into my chest. I'd waited years to hear anything close to that. As the evening drew on, I moved to the kitchen to bring out coffee when I saw movement by the front window. Gerald. He stood at the gate for a while, hesitant, then finally stepped onto the porch. My breath hitched, not from fear, but from memory. The man who had watched everything, who had said nothing. He knocked once. Soft. I stayed still. He knocked again. Then silence. I walked to the door and waited behind it, listening to the hush of autumn air and the rustle of leaves across the porch. A part of me wanted to crack it open to hear him out, but I had done that already too many times. Instead, I bent down and slid the letter I had written hours earlier under the door. "I've moved on. Please do the same." Through the window, I saw him read it, fold it, and slip it into his pocket. He didn't knock again, just turned and walked away. Jasmine and Lena didn't ask what it was about. They didn't need to. They had watched me take back what was mine, not just the money or the house, but my voice, my peace. I closed the door, the sound final, but not bitter. I leaned my forehead against the frame for a moment, then turned away from it. Some doors are better left closed. Thank you for being here, truly. If you felt a part of my story, if even a single moment mirrored something in your own life, then I ask you this. Don't walk away in silence. Speak up. Leave a comment for me. Not just for me, but for every person who's ever been told they were too cold, too distant, or too much. Let this space be a room I do open, one where honesty lives and healing breathes. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I stood still when the storm came and waited with proof, not pain. And that's something I hope you carry with you. You don't have to make a scene to reclaim your scene. Keep your records. Trust your instincts. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means observation. And observation is the root of strategy. To those walking through quiet betrayals or carrying invisible burdens, you're not alone, and you don't owe anyone access to your peace. Build your doors. Lock them if you must, but always keep a window cracked for those who come in truth. Now, tell me, what would you have done at that door? Your voice matters. Let it be heard below.